Welcome to the Council for a Parliament of the World's Religions webinar series. I'm Phyllis Curott. I serve on the Council's Board of Trustees and I'll be your moderator today. The Parliament of the World's Religions began in 1893 and has since been held in various locations around the world. Its vision is for a more just, peaceful, and sustainable world, and we work to cultivate harmony among the world's religious and spiritual communities. Our webinar series provides an opportunity for people from all over the world to engage with leaders in the interreligious movement through thoughtful discussions and practical trainings for interreligious work. Following today's presentation, we'll take your questions from our listeners. At any point during the webinar, you may type questions into the box on the screen. Today's webinar, Earth-Based Spirituality and Indigenous Paradigm, features Mr. Christopher Peters. Chris is President and CEO of Seventh Generation Fund for Indian Development, a Native-led Indigenous Peoples public foundation. For more than 35 years, his work has focused on grassroots social justice organizing, protecting sacred sites, working for holistic community renewal, rebuilding traditional economies, and supporting cultural revitalization efforts. He's also a trustee of the Parliament. It's my honor to welcome you, Chris.
Thank you, Phyllis, and also thank Matt for all the great work in putting together this webinar series. And I hope the listeners have had an opportunity to check out a few others. As Phyllis indicated, I am Chris Peters. That's my name. I am Pohlik-lah, or Yurok, and Karuk, or Karuk Indian. My tribes have lived in what is now northwestern California since the beginning of time. We're earth healing and earth renewal people. It is our understanding that our primary purpose in life is to heal and renew the earth. We're put here for no other reason. And throughout our history, we've done a pretty damn good job of it. We've been quite effective at sustaining the natural systems and renewing the earth. You know, we've survived with the earth for millennia. I am a member of the Board of Trustees for the Council for a Parliament on the World's Religion, and I'm very honored to offer this webinar entitled Earth-Based Spirituality, a Native Paradigm. This presentation will examine the fundamental precepts housed within Pohlik-lah, my tribal nation's worldview for basic human lifeways and the role that earth-based spirituality and world renewal philosophies can play in cultivating a better society for all people. I'm also the President and CEO of the Seventh Generation Fund for Indian Development, the oldest Native American foundation in the United States. We've been assisting Native nations to rebuild healthy and culturally vibrant communities for over 34 years. Seventh Generation Fund is dedicated to the preservation of traditional sovereignty and the cultural and philosophical uniqueness of Native nations and Native peoples. We are founded upon the philosophical precept that is widely held by many tribal people throughout the Americas, in that in all of our deliberations we consider the impact on the seventh generation to come. This philosophy teaches us how to be good ancestors, and is germane for our conversation today. You can find more information about Seventh Generation Fund on our website, and that's the number 7, GENFUND, 7genfund.org. Please visit and check out the work that we've been doing. Earth-based spirituality. You know, there are many legends that speak of earth-based spirituality. They're often present a cosmology that sometimes can be very difficult to comprehend by Eurocentric thinking. Nonetheless, they convey a native paradigm that expresses a wisdom and an intellect comparable to the myths and legends and sacred teachings and religious books of the world. Through an oral tradition, this knowledge is passed from generation to generation. Some legends are woven with events in daily life and special places to provide continuous explanations of how things came to be. The more esoteric knowledge maintained by a select few, spiritual leaders, medicine peoples, is inscribed in song or sacred formula and sang or recited during ceremonies or at special places known to them as sacred lands. Among my people, the Pohlik-lah, or downriver people as it is literally translated, the spirit world and the world of reality are as inseparable as time and space are malleable. And let me say that again. Among the Pohlik people, the spirit world and the world that we call reality are as inseparable as time and space are malleable. Both worlds and all of their many manifestations are animistic. Everything is alive. The tree, the birds, the plants, the rocks, the wind, the sand and the rain can talk, and all have a spirit and a state of consciousness. They are all alive and very much purposeful. Pursuant to this understanding and relationships that have evolved, there has evolved a spiritual connectedness with the natural world, with all of creation. We are inseparable from creation, both in this world of reality and in the spiritual world. We are all comprised of Earth Spirit. And Earth Spirit we call Pohlik-lah. Now the cosmology, I guess, of my people as a reference, as a point of conversation today that may have some relevance to other tribes in the nation, definitely, and to other peoples. You know, we talk about a Nathi-Kan time, this long time ago, time before time. And Oth we refer to as Oth is a human being, and I'll use them interchangeable, Oth and human being, and that's our word for who we are. You know, human beings knew how the earth was made. Our legends described a cosmology where Pohlik-lah, that great creative force or spiritual energy, you know, and some of you may be more familiar with the concept of a universal plane as some of the physicists, and I think Einstein coined the phrase, where there is an energy that connects everything in the world. Similarly, Pohlik-lah in our teachings is that universal plane. This creative force appeared with pre-human personages, spirit people or spiritual beings. We call them Wage. With the spiritual energy, the Wage and other earth spirits created order and balance on earth. There are many legends that describe the details of creation, and we know these legends to be true. We understand them to be true. They are central to our purpose in life and central to who we are as human beings. This wisdom and understanding defines our relationship to the earth and to all forms of life. It embraces natural systems or natural law, and it sets forth principles of how human beings must live on earth. It teaches respect, reverence, and a process of reconciliation or a process of reciprocity that sustains rather than drains the natural systems and elements of the earth. It teaches the necessity for keeping balance and order on earth. If we take a life, if we kill a deer, if we catch a fish, if we gather berries from the earth, we must give back at least an amount equal to that which we have taken. As Pohlik people, we have abided by these traditions and customs and lived peaceful, harmonious lives within our homelands since Nathi-Kan time. The images rolling on the screen are images from our local ceremonies, and I'll talk about them a little bit later in my conversation. The spiritual beings also established a system of law, and we refer to this as Indian law, that first of all instructs us not to violate natural order or natural law. Natural systems must be kept in balance, and if they're not, Oth, or human beings, will suffer the consequences. This infringement to natural order will come back on us. We understand that, and maybe in a rather, I think karma is the word often used too, but it's a concept in our tradition where if we do something wrong, it ultimately comes back upon us as human beings. You know, the infringement to natural order then will come back on us. If not coming back on us, then it will be visited upon our children, our grandchildren, or their great-grandchildren. It's truly inescapable. If we violate natural systems, if we violate Indian law, we suffer the consequences, and we know true. Mother Nature is unforgiving. If we violate natural systems, she will slap us, and she will slap us hard. The spirit people also created ceremonies or rituals that reaffirm our spiritual understandings and provide a means by which human beings can take care of the earth. The Pohlik people refer to this ritual as medicine making or high mountain medicine. We understand that the mountain or a place has spiritual intelligence, spiritual knowledge. Since Native-led time, Oth, our human beings, have used the sacred high country and the Ski mountain range for our medicine making. People may understand this as vision questing. And in this process of medicine making, we minister to the earth. We pray to the earth, and we pray for her healing. As required for this ritual of medicine making, one has to be living a truly good life, and has to be a good person. We refer to these as Karuk's. One has to be a good human being. Then, after periods of purification, or the cleaning of one's mind and soul through the use of a sweat house or a sweat lodge, our religious leaders completed pilgrimages to places such as Dr. Rock, Peak 8, Chimney Rock, Little Medicine Mountain, and other sacred places throughout the high country. Sacred places are not only sacred to human beings, and I think that's a very important understanding for this earth-based spirituality practice. Sacred places are not sacred only to human beings, but are sacred to all of creation. They're sacred to the bear, the deer, the spider. They're sacred to a flower, an insect, and the trees. They're the heart and soul of a bioregion and an ecosystem. In recent years, I've realized that anthropocentrism can be contagious, and some people think that humans are the only species that can perceive sacredness. At these places, we fast, we dance, we jump, we sing, and with intense prayer, deep meditation, and prolonged and continuously driven thought, sometimes for 10 days or so, religious leaders administer to the earth. And through this process, we are embraced with the spirit of the earth, Pohlik-lah, the all-encompassing spirit. And we achieve revelation. The mountain shares sacred knowledge. The spirit shares sacred knowledge. And then we know what has not been known before. We achieve revelation. And we acquire the wisdom and knowledge that reaffirms our earth-based spiritual ideology. We also receive the spiritual knowledge or power or energy needed to perform earth healing and earth renewal ceremonies. And some of those we see on the screen. The Srach, the white deerskin dance, and the Pohlik-lah, or the raising up ceremony. These ceremonies form the foundation of our earth-based spiritual practice. The white deerskin dance, we use albino deer in that ceremony. It's a 10-day ceremony, and it's a earth renewal ceremony. We pray to bring forth new life for another year, that we can have food, that we can have and enjoy all that we have enjoyed up to this point in history. And we bring forth that new life. And historically, when I was first beginning, you hear a lot that the ceremonies are symbolic efforts and of an event or actions that happen historically. Then as we get involved in the ceremonies, we understand there is no symbolism here. We are renewing the earth. We are praying to the earth, and with human energy and with human prayer, we bring forth that new life. That raising up ceremony, the Pohlik-lah ceremony, also a 10-day ceremony that follows the white deerskin dance. And with this, we dance with large cone-shaped baskets, and in those baskets we have medicine. And the baskets represent all that is good and all that is sacred in life. And we up, and then we stomp the earth. We stomp down to set the balance order back into the earth. We put into the earth all that is bad and all that is evil. And we do that with intense emotion and with prayer, group prayer. And these ceremonies are alive and well here in Northern California. And I don't know, Phyllis, if you have any questions. I kind of covered that ceremonial stuff briefly. Please interrupt me if you think I need to cover some more. These revelations also inform the ethical and moral foundation of our peoples and set forth the system of values of our ecologically centered paradigm. If you haven't realized it up to this point, please understand that Pohlik-lah are not monotheistic. We don't have only one God. And we have not evolved from an Abrahamic theology. The native paradigm, and generally in the Americas, but more specifically here in Northern California with my people, our paradigm is significantly different. It is through legend and ceremony that we ought to understand that our creation happened within our territory, happened here in Northern California. We're not some lost tribe from Israel, and we didn't truck across the Bering Straits. Our homelands here in Northern California contain rocks, contain mountains, contain rivers that stand in testimony to our mythological world and understanding, and it corroborates the Pohlik cosmology. Because those things appear in legends, those rocks, those mountains, those rivers, they're ingrained in legend and story that describe our cosmology. Thus, nowhere else in the world can such an emotional and spiritual relationship exist other than the Klamath River and the coastal regions of northwestern California. We are spiritually connected and rooted to this place, It is our homelands. And it is the only place in the world that we understand this earth-based spirituality. The spirits know us, and we know them. Then change, and then change. Now, folks today can understand a narrative. It has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. And up to this point in the cycle of time, Pohlik people's narrative is laced with concepts of forever lasting life if we human beings honored natural law, continued our ceremonies, and continued our primary responsibilities of healing and renewing the earth, there would be forever lasting life. There's no Armageddon, there's no final conflict, there is only life. Our narrative has no ending. It is comprised of systems and cycles of renewal and rebirth. And then things radically changed, and so too our world and all of its many manifestations. The world of the Pohlik people has been turned upside down. Our fundamental precepts of earth-based spirituality was violated, was violently destroyed, and constantly undermined ever since the infamous and misguided sailor found his way to our shores and began to colonize the world. Now, I know there's some questions later here on the doctrine of discovery. It's an issue that we had addressed during the Parliament in Melbourne, and if some of you had an opportunity to attend some of the sessions, can understand the significance of the doctrine of Christian discovery, if you will. But you know, I will only say a few things about it now, and let's get back to it during the question period, which is coming up soon, and I need to probably speed up here too. But please understand, the Pope did not then, nor does he now, have the authority to give away Central and South America. You know, certainly they didn't have the authority to give away the Americas. You know, yet all of the premise for the taking of land is based upon the doctrine of Christian discovery. A lot of the principles is brought forth in contemporary American Indian law and policy, and is still ingrained in the court systems. You know, all of the racist laws, the Jim Crow laws, have been removed from the precedents of the Supreme Court, but the laws that establish the racist laws that establish our relationship to the United States are still practiced and still included in court decisions today. As recent as 2005, the doctrine of Christian discovery offered indigenous peoples of the Americas death or conversion, but mostly death, either through a cognizant or conscious intent or through outright stupidity. Such colonizing not only exterminated millions of indigenous peoples, but also brought our earth-based spiritual understanding, that practice, to a brink of extinction. The notion of justice, I guess, in this regard, when it applies to atrocities of this magnitude, cannot simply be settled or measured in material wealth, but would have to cut deeply into the souls of the perpetrators. A mechanistic worldview provided European nations sanction for the manipulation and exploitation of nature. Christian theology and the doctrine of Christian discovery affirm the framework of domination over pagans or indigenous peoples and all non-Christian land of the earth. And as my friend Stu Newcomb says, we are the pagans in the Promised Land. And he has a book out entitled the same. These are some of the issues that represent indigenous peoples, and I have substantially more information prepared, but I'm looking at my time and seeing that we're running close to a question period. And Phyllis, what do you suggest we do at this stage?
Why don't we take a few questions that will draw out some of what you presented. First, I want to thank you very much for a terrific presentation thus far, and very much for sharing the details of these two specific sacred ceremonies. I think that the people who are participating in this were probably, like myself, very moved. And you ended your talk by bringing up the doctrine of discovery. So one of the questions that we have here, in fact, from someone in Arizona who was present at the 2009 Parliament in Melbourne, Australia, has asked this question. Many representatives of Indigenous communities participated in the 2009 Parliament of the World's Religions in Melbourne. Can you tell us what efforts have continued since that gathering in 2009? And to that question, I would add one of the important things that seemed to come out of the Indigenous track and that meeting was a very fruitful discussion of the doctrine of discovery. So could you tell us a little bit about the efforts now?
I guess the campaign to bring attention to the doctrine of discovery, and more specifically the papal bulls of 1493 and 1454, where it set forth these concepts that that all lands of the world, if not already discovered by Christians, were open for grabs. And at the time, it set forth a land grab, an enterprise of discovery that spread throughout the world. The doctrine of discovery certainly applies to us here in America, but is also seen in other countries and regions of the world as well. Certainly Australia, New Zealand, Africa, and it moved throughout the world. Since Melbourne, and Melbourne provided us an opportunity to raise these issues among interfaith community, and we were received extremely well, and very thankful for that. And I think that reception that we received, not only on doctrine of discovery issue, but other indigenous issues that we presented there as well, motivated me to become a member of the Board of Trustees for the Parliament. And hopefully with my presence and the support that we get there, that other sort of earth-based spiritual understandings can be raised up, and getting our seat at the table, if you will, that we are, indigenous peoples are still alive and well, and we have a connection to the earth. We have a philosophy and we have a tradition that that may not provide all of the answers or any of the answers to the world calamities now, but at least it'll give people a starting place to examine the human being's responsibility here on earth. And I think that's an important position to have. Since Melbourne, the doctrine of discovery, we raised this issue at the United Nations, and our vice chairperson, Tanya Ganella-Fishner, she is with the American Indian Law Alliance, authored a paper that was shared within the United Nations about the doctrine of discovery, and it focused here only on the Americas. Certainly papers throughout the world need to be need to be thought through and written. So that paper was presented to the United Nations, and we have a piece of the United Nations where we bring issues. It's called the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, and we've had several side sessions or workshops around the doctrine, and raised this issue to a level where next year, next August, it will be a central theme for discussion purposes at the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. So you know, we've done quite a bit, and certainly there's been a lot of organizing, and a lot of talk, and a lot of opportunities to raise this issue in civil society as well. It's gaining momentum, you know, and people are understanding. You know, the Pope doesn't have the authority to give away half the world. You know, just does not have the authority, and to continue to recognize that as a principle is you know, and again, we're not asking for everybody to give the land back. You know, we're just asking, hey, look here, this is a serious breach of a relationship to indigenous people, and it must be rectified. You know, and if we go by their laws only, then it could change some real critical legal foundations in which we indigenous peoples are related to by these legal institutions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm beginning to ramble on the subject, so maybe we can go on to another question.
Absolutely, no, and that was a very thorough response. I had a question as you were describing ceremonies and the sacred lands. A more philosophical question, but also one with practical implications that comes out of the disaster created by the doctrine of discovery, which is how an earth-based spiritual wisdom and the people who live according to that, how you survive culturally, how you survive spiritually when you are forcibly separated from your sacred lands. How do you keep a tradition alive, and how do you maintain the relationship with the spirits of the place, with the spirits of the land?
Well, fortunately, you know, I haven't had the personal experience to go through that, because our homelands are relatively intact and also very remote and very isolated. You know, I think it's a germane question not only for indigenous peoples but for all human beings that have been uprooted. And keep in mind, Phyllis, you know, it's my understanding that all human beings, you know, come from this basic understanding. You know, we all ran naked through the forest. You know, we all had that relationship to the spirit. At some point in our genetic makeup, we understand this, so you know, it's a question that is a question I'm sure not only indigenous peoples that have been removed are dealing with, but also other people. You know, and how do you become native to the land again? Yes. and understand that, you know, and what we have an understanding that we need to go out and look for it. You know, historically, our people we're certainly have knowledge in and around us, but the type of knowledge that we're talking about is a knowledge that we have to seek out. You know, we have to experience that knowledge ourselves to be reaffirmed, to be self-actualized as human beings. It takes a process of looking for it. You know, going to the mountains and looking for that connection. And once that connection is established, then you understand it more deeply. I think with folks that have been removed from their homelands, certainly that search continues, and they're in the homelands of other folks. You know, we say, you know, for our brothers and sisters coming from Central and South America, either by choice or by force, you know, if they truly want to reconnect with who they are or continue their identity, then reach out to the tribal nations whose territory in which they are located now, and establish a relationship, have conversations, and acknowledge that we are visiting this territory. We are newcomers. The knowledge that indigenous peoples have of the land are extremely important to understand. And many Native nations are getting to the point where they're willing to share that knowledge. You know, we work with Mayan communities in San Francisco and Los Angeles and in Florida. You know, we work with significant numbers of indigenous peoples, you know, from the South, and we work with a lot of Native peoples here that have migrated, again by choice or by force, to urban centers in the United States, and they are collectively coming together and engaged in that search as a group.
I know it's certainly true of members of my broad spiritual community who are engaged in trying to rediscover the indigenous traditions of their European ancestors, but who are acutely aware of the fact that they are Americans living on a land that was taken from others. And so there's a desire to retrieve the way of your ancestors, but also to be educated by the spirits of the place in which you reside, with respect for those whose land it once was. I personally have always said, the times are different, but the teacher is the same. The sacred is present within the earth itself, and when we open ourselves to it, it will teach us what we need. Which takes me to another wonderful question that is here from Adelaide, Australia. They want to know, Chris, what do you think the future holds for young Native Americans, and what needs to be done to support the youth?
Well, on first glance, with many Native communities, reservation life is tough, you know, and to try to force a round peg in a square hole is extremely difficult. Is the answer, I guess. There is a renaissance in Native community that is happening all over. Youth are anxious and eager for this earth-based spiritual knowledge, but there are many stumbling blocks, and one such stumbling blocks, of course, is sacred lands protection.
Yes. So
I hope we didn't lose all of the participants in this webinar.
Just a few. I gather they're signing back on, right?
Okay.
All right. So shall we continue? We have a...
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Great. Let's do that. And hopefully people will be successful in rejoining us. We have a question from British Columbia in Canada asking how can we further encourage the formal environmental movement to work with indigenous peoples around the world?
Well, that's a $100 question. Certainly something that we're confronted here with Seventh Generation Fund on an ongoing basis. You know, we have found, and not all environmental organizations, but certainly there is that the Beltway groups. They are equally good at mining as the mining corporations. They mine issues. They mine issues that surface in the world, in Americas, and they claim them. You know, on the one hand, it's good that they raise them to a national level, but they have the mechanisms, the machinery, I guess, to capitalize on that economically. And the trickle down to those communities that are directly impacted by those environmental issues sometimes doesn't happen. So I think in terms of that's my criticalness of the environmental movement. So I have another one, you know, and I'm good at this. So Yeah, the other one is certainly mining the issues, but mining the vocabulary, and claiming the vocabulary. Environmental justice becomes a phrase that now has no meaning. It has been picked up and used and misused on a national level by the broader environmental movements. The native philosophy, the native understanding, much of which we talked about today, certainly the sacredness of the wilderness. I think some of that mining has been beneficial in that I think they have a vocabulary now to express a description of what the battles are about. Because we're talking about an earth-based spirit. And still their veil of needs to be lifted. They see the political issues and not see, I guess, the on-the-ground impacts. And I hate to say this so broadly, but that's what we experience as Native folks. There are many fantastic people in the environmental movement, and I don't want this in any way to suggest that they're not. But I think the overall impacts in our community has been an uphill battle. Unfortunately, they're in some situation, I guess, they're intellectually incapable of understanding the sacred, so that they're more accustomed to dealing with the politic of it. The next step is sort of lifting the veil of the sacred, lifting the veil to perceive the earth is alive, the animistic qualities of nature, that things are alive, is a major step, not only for environmentalists, but perhaps for other theologies and other populations. We get caught so much in our intellectual understandings and our intellectual ruts that it puts a shroud over us to the point where that's all we see, and once that veil or that shroud is lifted, and you see that things are connected, that the earth is alive, has a spirit. So to answer the questions, it is an uphill battle, and we continue to work at it.
That's a wonderful answer, and it goes to the heart of the source of values, that what we need is more than a transformation of, we need more than green technology. We need a green spirit. You don't destroy what you hold, what you know to be sacred, but the knowledge, it's not an intellectual knowledge. It's a visceral knowledge, and that, I think, is one of the offerings of indigenous communities, is that wisdom, that heart wisdom, to the environmental movement. Questions whether they will be open to it, or whether they'll remain sort of locked in a pragmatic, political, beltway mindset.
Yeah, and by force or by choice, all human beings will come to some reality. Either they make a choice now to begin a major social transformation in society, or it gets to the point of where environmental degradation is so widespread that human beings are forced to make a change. And we can only hope that choice will prevail and force can be postponed, because the state of the world is in crises.
Yes.
And we shouldn't be focused on the national politics. Shouldn't be an issue of jobs. Shouldn't be an issue of how to this 99% share in the pie. It shouldn't be an issue of reconstructing the American dream. The American dream has been a nightmare. It has been a nightmare for all species on Earth, and certainly the beneficiaries has been sort of this elite human, this anthropocentrism that pervades the world, you know. But the impacts of our livelihoods has been traumatic. It has been detrimental to life itself.
Yes, this is true. We have a question here from Massachusetts. It's a question about how other faith communities can support the work of Native Americans to protect sacred spaces, which is related to the conversation we've been having, certainly.
Definitely. You know, I think in terms of sacred spaces, that there is sort of a broader understanding, at least in the interfaith movements, that hey, there is sacred land. You know, sacred land is not only those lands identified by Christian theology or Abrahamic theology, that other peoples understand sacredness and believe in it as intensely as Christian theology. You know, I think the broader nature of the question, it would be great if we began to withdraw an effort to missionize, you know, to proselytize. And that's so difficult for folks, you know. Their original instructions, it seems to be to build their masses. You know, and unfortunately, you know, it comes into indigenous communities and causes some havoc. You know, certainly it causes an identity crisis that plagues our communities. You know, a native person in appearance, but in the mind maybe completely understanding a different philosophy, and at some point in life those two issues kind of collide and causes some major social problems. So, you know, my encouragement is to begin to back off the issue of proselytization, which to Abrahamic theology is like saying, you know, it needs to happen.
Hopefully participating
but certainly the political realm is there. Oh, the political realm is there, you know, and we have been struggling for years. Here in the United States, the sacred lands can be destroyed, can be eroded, can be bulldozed, can be mined, can be blown up, and native peoples who practice earth-based spiritual understanding have no litigative recourse within the American judicial process. And that is a crisis. That needs to be changed. And sacred places throughout the United States, you know, such as what's happening on San Francisco Peaks, Mount Taylor, you know, and some 40 other places that are currently in harm's way, you know, are issues that everybody should be aware of, but almost no political momentum. You know, environmental organizations that understand the sacred should be raising these issues aggressively, because the issue of sacred land is so pivotal in protection of ecosystems, protection of the broader world.
Yes. We have another question that I think is related to this. At the Parliament in 2009, which we had talked about briefly before, there was a very important assembly of indigenous people. Are you aware of any further efforts to develop working coalitions of indigenous peoples at the international level to address many similar problems that most of those communities face all over the world.
You know, at the United Nations level, you know, certainly there is a growing efforts for coalition building to move issues, and that you know, the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues has been a critical avenue to bring people together, and it generally is 2 weeks in New York where Indigenous peoples from all over the world converge. We have breakout sessions. We have global Indigenous caucuses. We have, you know, just a whole wide range of opportunities and issues to become familiar with and to mobilize internationally. You know, certainly with regard to the Parliament, and that is my task over the next couple of years, is to build that network of Indigenous peoples. And network, we're talking resourcing Indigenous peoples to be able to actively engage in the Parliament's agenda for the coming session, and that's what my task of the next couple of years are, and everybody's task, I guess, is how do we mobilize more broader diversity within the Parliament.
Yes, great. Thank you very much. I think, unfortunately, we are approaching the conclusion, although we lost a couple of minutes there, so we can go over a little bit. But I think we've, unfortunately, we're coming to the end. We do have some more questions here. I wish we had time. One more. We've had many questions come in, so let me just ask this one, and then we will conclude. Unfortunately, we'll have to draw to an end. We've had many questions come in about how non-Indigenous people can best partner with Indigenous peoples and communities. Is there anything more you'd like to say about this specific topic?
Yeah, I think the issue of Indigenous peoples and non-Indigenous peoples, a relationship building has to happen. You know, we have, I guess, in terms of our work as Indigenous people, we're still renewing our identity, we're still building our ceremonies, and we're still reconstructing or revisioning who we are in this contemporary society. And that's going to take a little bit of time. You know, only recently have we been able to think again, to envision ceremonies and to bring them back, you know. And you know, the history of Native peoples and federal Indian policy has been devastating, and continues to be devastating with existing court decisions that deny us avenues into the court system to bring a First Amendment right. And you know, the understanding is that the first Americans do not have First Amendment protection of the Constitution. You know, legal precedence has clearly established that. I think in terms of the need for a functional process for non-Indigenous peoples to enjoy the sacred is significant. Their approach often is the appropriation of what's there, and we have been appropriated. Our symbolisms, our process has been appropriated. You know, I think some conversation needs to happen on a broader scale, and maybe the Parliament can be a focus of that. But you know, some discussion around, well, what is appropriate for non-Indigenous peoples, and what can they do to actualize their spiritual understanding or reconnecting to the Earth Spirit? What is that? What avenues are open for that? You know, what can we do to enhance that without infringing upon Indigenous traditions and Indigenous cultures? So that's certainly a conversation that we need to have.
Yes, it's a very important conversation, and it erupted in many forums at the Melbourne Parliament, where practitioners of the more contemporary European Western Abrahamic faiths were saying that they did not want to appropriate, but felt they didn't have their own wisdom. And in fact, a number of Aboriginal elders said, you do. You have your own indigenous traditions. You need to find them and retrieve them, renew them, reconstruct them. And then you find a relationship for partnership as opposed to one rooted in an appropriation. So, Chris, thank you very much. This was a terrific webinar, and I want to extend my thanks to everyone who joined us today and who rejoined us today for this very fruitful conversation with Christopher Peters. Please visit the website that he provided the information for on the Seventh Generation Fund, and please join the Parliament for our next webinar with Catherine Marshall, who will be speaking on the role of religion in addressing poverty and development. And we invite you to stay connected to the interreligious movement through our email newsletter and by visiting our social network at peacenext.org and by visiting our website. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available on our website within the next few days if you'd like to review it or share it with others, which we encourage you to do. And of course, we would encourage you to support the Parliament in its work by participating and also financially. That would be an enormous help to us to do the work that we're devoted to. For years, the Council has creatively and concretely worked to link the interreligious movement from the local to the global. And today we send our thanks to all of you who are doing your own part for a better world. Thank you. Once again, on behalf of the Council for the Parliament of the World's Religions, thank you, Chris, and thank all of you for joining us today.